So, hello everyone. Good afternoon. I also want to say good morning, maybe also good evening. Are people coming in, Carla?
Yeah, I see the numbers are growing. We probably want to give it a minute or two more because they seem to be clicking up.
Let's do that.
And I see some friends on the line.
Mhm. So let's wait half a minute longer. So, once again, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining our webinar where we will cover the key findings of a life cycle assessment as part of our project called Textile Circularity Exchange in Morocco. We assessed a piloted circular cotton supply chain where we were using mechanically recycled cotton from post-industrial cutting waste. We would like to take this opportunity to, of course, thank the IFC team, but also the governments of Morocco, Spain, and the Netherlands, as well as AMIT, the Textile and Apparel Association of Morocco. My name is Petra Schweiger, and I'm part of the Accelerating Circularity team. So I'm here with Karla Magruder, Accelerating Circularity founder and president. Later in the hour, we will bring into the conversation Mrs. Eleanor Richardson. Eleanor is Operations Officer, IFC Morocco. And of course, we will discuss the findings and recommendations of the LCA study with the CEO of Green Story, Akhil Sivanandan. Green Story conducted the assessment. So towards the end, we hopefully will have some time for the Q&A. I would ask you to put your questions into the chat box, and we will try to pick up as many questions as possible towards the end. So let's go ahead. Do let us know in the chat box where you're joining in from today. That would be interesting. So I would like to hand over to Karla now. Karla will give us a brief introduction to our organization. And to set the stage, she will also give us a summary of the TCE project together with IFC Morocco. Karla, please.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Petra. And thanks everybody for joining. Looking forward to hopefully some good questions as we go through this webinar. So Accelerating Circularity is a nonprofit. We're based in the United States, but we work across the US, Europe, and in places like Morocco. So we talk about being an action-oriented nonprofit focused on textile to textile recycling systems at a commercial scale through a collaborative stakeholder-led approach. And that's really important. And that's the way that we worked in Morocco, where we brought many of the players in the Moroccan textile supply chain together. As an organization, we have a mission that's pretty straightforward, and it's to build circular systems that turn used textiles into new raw materials. These new systems are going to be critical for the transition that the industry needs to make. And of course, I hope everybody would join us on a vision of a world in which textiles are no longer wasted. So that's in a quick overview, who we are. And when we talk about the Moroccan textile and apparel ecosystem, you can see some of the key figures here. It's very focused around the Tangier area with other pockets of textile industry, but there's close to 1,700 companies working in textiles in Morocco. It's about 246,000 jobs. So it's the #1 industrial employer. It's very important that the textile industry stays healthy in Morocco. They have an annual production capacity of about 1 billion items. It's a significant number. We've got to be careful. And that's one reason we need to make this transition, right? Today, 99% of the fabrics are imported into Morocco. And what we're looking at is potentially finding ways where it makes sense for more of the processes to be done in Morocco. So the ready-made garment business in 2024 is a value of approximately 4.5 billion US dollars. And also very interesting, about 97% is going to Europe, with a huge percentage of that headed to Spain. And so the production waste volume from all of this is somewhere around 66,500 metric tons a year, right? It's about 15–16% of the post-industrial waste that's exported. All right, next slide. So the textile circularity exchange was developed specifically to engage the textile value chain along with brands and retailers to collaborate. We talked a minute ago about collaboration and how important that is on the development of circular systems using post-industrial materials for mechanical and chemical recycling methods, from collection through finished product, right? There's all of the materials that are being imported into Morocco, and then what can be done with them. So the vision that we had as we were starting this is the end of life disposition established for all this post-industrial waste. What are the things that we can do with these materials that create a more circular system? And then 100% of post-industrial cotton recycled in Morocco by 2027. Certainly, the volume of cotton fabrics there make it an ideal feedstock for recycling methods. All right.
So thank you very much, Karla. So we're heading over to Green Story. Akhil, welcome again, and thanks so much for doing the webinar with us today. Would you briefly tell us about Green Story?
Thank you, Petra. Hi, everyone. As Petra mentioned, I'm the CEO of Green Story. What Green Story is we're a leading global AI-enabled B2B sustainability intelligence platform with a focus on the apparel and textile space. Within this space, we work on everything connected with lifecycle assessment, from deep LCA to digital product passports, product level footprint assessments, research, corporate footprint, and AI-enabled audit and publishing systems for DPPs and LCAs. We've been around for about 10 years now, with headquarters in the Netherlands, that's where I'm based out of, and offices in 4 countries. We have worked with hundreds of global brands and thousands of suppliers worldwide. And we are special advisors to institutions and governments across the world, including the government of India, on lifecycle assessment, sustainability, and product carbon footprint. And I'm very glad to participate in the conversation today.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, so I'm sure everybody is excited to find out about the LCA results, but just a bit more patience. We want to take also a few minutes to explain how do ESPR, so the Eco Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, DPP, and an LCA connect, especially when we come from a supplier's perspective. We heard from Karla before that Morocco exports 97% of their production to the EU, primarily Spain and France. That also means that the suppliers will need to provide data to their brands. And within this project, the purpose of the LCA study was actually twofold. So for one, of course, to assess and compare for future improvements. But then also for the stakeholders involved, it was actually a very good opportunity to check and get a better understanding of their data readiness ahead of legislation. So Akhil, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, this is kind of the rationalization of the alphabet soup that we all have. If you look at where the space is right now, it's very much early 2000s IT, where a new system is being built into an industry. So life cycle assessment is right now being driven by regulation a lot. But the rationale is not just about regulation, it's also about good data. And what we've all experienced in our lifetimes is what good and accurate data it can lead to. When it comes to the regulation, there's been a huge shift over the last few years where there's a lot of things that were in the plan, which are now being implemented on greenwashing, on supply chain traceability and tracking. So what LCA does is it enables all of this. It's a very important exercise when it comes to regulatory compliance, especially as Karla mentioned before, for regions which are focused on the EU, because a lot of this is being led by the EU. So a great example here is ESPR, or Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation, where the broader claim, broader idea is eco design, but everything really starts with data. So what the regulations pushing for right now over the next 2 years, that includes 2026, where it comes into force, is that we must have in-depth product level information, which can be verified and trusted. So in a way, by doing this project, what we're doing is bringing forward what it would be like to deal with this major regulation in 2026 and 2027 to the Moroccan textile ecosystem. Is kind of a taste of all of that. But most importantly, if you look at it, it's not just about compliance. It's really about the idea that if you have good data, it can be used in multiple ways, from brand requirements, so increasing potential revenue and value that you provide to your supply chain and to your buyers, to investments and funding opportunities. More and more funds nowadays are looking at ESG as a lens, and even footprint and life cycle assessment as a lens to open all of this up. So the era of really spend-based estimates on carbon accounting is pretty much over from what we see, and looking at activity-based real footprint through systems like LCA is the way forward. And if there's anything else you should take from this, is that good data really matters, and there's many ways to use this.
Great, thank you very much, Akhil. So let's go into it. What was the goal? What was the scope? Akhil, you want to explain it to us?
Right. So the goal and scope is pretty straightforward. We were really looking at like a singular supply chain and analyzing the environmental impact based on that. So not everybody is familiar with the concept of LCA. So just very broadly speaking, LCA, think of it as like an addition of all the different impacts across your supply chain to a specific point. The beginning of the supply chain is typically called cradle. That's where, say, the cotton is grown, for example, is the cradle, the beginning, and the end is the grave. So you would have heard the term cradle to grave. In this case, we looked at a cradle to gate, and gate is any point in the supply chain where you're stopping the assessment. And in this case, we were stopping the assessment, after the initial processing and compacting and all was done, just before the cut and sew stage. So we're looking at the fabrics that will be produced. So we focused on a single jersey fabric, 180 GSM, functional unit of 1 kg. And the idea was to analyze the environmental impact of adding mechanically recycled fabric to a typical supply chain, in this case, 20%. And we looked at 3 key impact categories: global warming potential, otherwise known as carbon, energy consumption, as well as water usage. And this encapsulates the overall idea of this. So we looked at this and also ran a lot of scenarios. So not just this particular supply chain, we also looked at different scenarios if substitutions were made, different types of materials were used, and did lots of comparisons so we could really understand how this compares to global supply chains, to other systems out there. So that was the idea here. So we looked at the Moroccan supply chain with 20% recycled materials and 80% virgin, and compared it against many different categories and systems, which you will see.
Yeah, exactly. So, Akhil was mentioning already the supply chain we assessed, and I wanna talk a bit of the how and the why we decided for this particular supply chain. So, as a major part of the TCE, the Textile Circularity Exchange project, is a range of pilots that also pressure test the circular systems. And within the range of pilots, we selected one particular one, which we call supply chain cotton white, for the assessment. And eventually, we also decided to use this as a baseline. So the actual pilot, we tried to mimic the actual pilot as much as possible. In the end, we had to make some adjustments because of production capacities. But the way the flow looks, we have a cutting waste coming from two factories, from two regions, Marrakesh and Tangier. The waste then goes into a consolidation center for sorting for accuracy and also volume aggregation. And then the bales go into a warehouse. This system is actually operational at rather small scale today, but it is up and running. The mechanical recycling also happens within Morocco. One of our project stakeholders has a facility. But what is special here, and if you really look closely at the visual, is the way Morocco as an industry is set up. There is a lack of spinning capacities within Morocco. So what happens today within the pilot also is that the recycled fiber has to be exported to Spain, Turkey, or Portugal for yarn spinning. So yarn spinning happens outside. Yarn is then shipped back to Morocco for knitting and finishing. So Akhil mentioned already, we wanted to assess a single jersey, 180 GSM, very regular product with 20% of these recycled cotton and 80% organic cotton. We started rather low. We understand when it comes to post-industrial, 20% is rather low. The waste that was used was either white or grayish, and the baseline does not include any dyeing stage, but it includes fabric finishing and bleaching. So this is what we decided to use as a baseline and then compare with different scenarios. So Akhil, we have here also the results given. I know we are more interested in the comparisons, but do you want to explain briefly the results and also talk very briefly about the hotspots we found?
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to talk a little bit about the data first. So a lot of this was very specific primary data, site-specific primary data, which we collaborated with Accelerating Circularity, a lot of the data collection. And when there were gaps, which were a few of them, secondary and proxy data was used. For background flows, we used secondary and proxy data as well, using several databases. And to fill in the gaps, we use our own proprietary data as well as third-party reviewed scientific literature. The checks were all done by the Green Story team as well for all of this before it was applied. In terms of overall impact, without context, it doesn't give much to you, but I'll just read it out here. So EF 3.1 climate change here is basically what you'd call carbon. It's measured in kilograms carbon dioxide equivalent. And the total impact of this per kg of the finished item was 11.3 kgs. When we are looking at the resource use, which is the energy in megajoules, it was 158.7 megajoules. And for water usage, which is measured in meter cubed, it's 6.899 meter cubed overall. It's multiplied 1,000 for liters. And that's basically where the impacts came from. Now, the hotspots was really interesting because it's very, very concentrated when we examined it. So about 91% of the total impact across most of the categories especially for global warming potential came from just 6 stages. So each about 10%. And in fact, for all 3 impact indicators, carbon, energy, and water, 3 stages contributed to 50% or more than the footprint. So if you kind of dive down a little bit, a big contributor here in the emissions and energy space was the use of heavy fuel oil. And soda ash production actually had a pretty big contribution in the case of the water usage as well, overall for the supply chain. So these will give you an indicator already of, the interventions as we talk about it, and the low-hanging fruit towards the end of the presentation when you go to it.
Mhm. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Okay. So Akhil mentioned it already. Yes, for one, we assessed this very close to actual pilot flow. But then, of course, we also wanted to have various scenarios to compare the baseline with. And here, big shout out to the Green Story team, in fact, because they were very open in conversations, very supportive to really come up with a range of scenarios. I think that was highly interesting. So today in this webinar, we are only going to highlight a few of those comparisons. I understand more will be covered in the final TCE report later this year anyway. So when we look at the different comparatives and scenarios, so when we look at the first two scenarios, I want to highlight those ones for now, because these are the ones where the local context is coming in. So these are the two scenarios that are the business as usual scenarios. So for one, they are based on a linear supply chain of 100% organic cotton, 100% conventional cotton, linear supply chains. On the other hand, they are also a business as usual when it comes to the current business model. We heard Karla talk about Morocco primarily being a CMT industry. We heard that 99% of the fabrics are imported from outside. So what we took into consideration is the linear supply chain, but also made outside Morocco, in this particular case, made in Spain to keep the RCA study cohesive, and then imported and shipped to Morocco. So it's cradle to gate. We stop at the gate of the mill, but yes, it is all fully manufactured outside of Morocco. So we had then also a sort of business as usual scenario when it comes to a circular supply chain. So single jersey 180 GSM using 20% recycled cotton, 80% organic cotton, but also made outside Morocco and then eventually shipped. The range of scenarios we had, of course, I mentioned it before, we had the baseline where we use waste in white and grayish. We did not consider the dyeing stage at the baseline, but then of course we have a scenario where we over dye the fabric in a darker color, for instance. Then we also looked at higher recycled contents. Why? The reason is that our stakeholders that were part of the study already make fabrics using 50% recycled content, also 100% recycled content. So clearly we wanted to add this one as well. And one of those scenarios we're going to look at in detail also in a minute. And then a very important one is the one called circular supply chain, fully made in Morocco. So this one we want to highlight for sure. That scenario is around the mission of the project. So if you remember, the mission of TCE is to establish circular systems in Morocco. That, of course, means collecting and sorting production waste for recycling to eventually make a finished product, all in Morocco. And this is exactly the difference to the baseline. In the baseline, we have seen mimicking the actual pilot where the fiber has to go out of Morocco for yarn spinning. In this scenario, we are also considering the yarn spinning within Morocco, which in reality is not the case today. So this is a future scenario using post-industrial waste, a circular supply chain, and fabric fully made in Morocco. So here you see the rundown all of the comparatives and scenarios. And for now, we're going to look into comparative 100% organic cotton. Akhil.
Thanks, Petra. So of the 3 comparators and 8 scenarios that we analyzed, I think this was one of the most interesting to me because this is what I'd call the litmus test. If you look at how the layperson or the world kind of sees a sustainable supply chain, it would be encapsulated in such a supply chain, which is 100% organic cotton using greener grid. Spain has technically somewhat of a green grid. Most of it is natural gas and a large chunk of wind. So that the idea was, if we are actually doing a comparison against the baseline, is it far off from this? And it wasn't, right? So you have the proof right here in terms of the baseline and the impact. Overall, the baseline is just almost a tiny margin of error higher, 0.9%. It's less than 2% for LCA. Typically, you wouldn't consider that too much, given it's under the margin of error. The energy use is definitely higher as well in the baseline scenario. Again, this is fossil fuel energy. And of course, because of the addition of recycled materials here, the water usage overall is much lower in the baseline. And this would be the case against most virgin cotton fibers, even organic cotton. So what is interesting was, even with the baseline scenarios, just 20% recycled materials, and the additional transportation that was there on going to Spain, spinning, and coming back, the addition of the recycled fiber here almost nullifies the advantage that Spain has from 100% organic cotton supply chain, which really kind of makes you think about like how to position and the I guess importance of adding more recycled content, which we explored further in the next scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Great. So yeah, so one of the scenarios that we previously mentioned is also we increase the recycled content. So the one we're going to look at is now we increase from 20% from the baseline to 50% and 50% organic cotton. Naturally, the results are better, but we also want to compare it to the previous 100% organic cotton one. So you want to walk us through, Akhil?
Yeah, thanks, Petra. So, I mean, this was also quite interesting to me, because this is almost like a BAU scenario when it comes to what the actual usage is. A lot of people are using 50% recycled content. So if we think back, so let's look at this first. Of course, now when you compare it to the baseline, you're increasing the recycled content, which is the primary driver for reducing the impact. So therefore, overall, the baseline is 7.8% higher in carbon emissions, 6.4% higher in fossil fuel, and 10% higher in water usage, all because we've increased more than doubled the use of recycled cotton in this scenario. Now, if we compare this against the organic cotton from the Spanish grid, the impact again is materially lower across the board. So if you just one slide ago, we talked about what the impact could be of utilizing 20% versus the Spanish grid. And if we look at it here, of 50% versus 100% organic in the Spanish grid, overall impact is significantly lower. Baseline versus 100% organic cotton in Spain was about the same. So this is 7% lower. Baseline versus organic cotton was 9.7% higher energy use. Here is 6.4%. So there is about a 3% difference. Of course, moving towards Spain in this case because of the difference in the electricity grid, keeping in mind we kept all of this in Morocco. And then the water usage, of course, there's a massive difference, a 20% difference versus using fully organic, because you're just adding more recycled cotton, which typically has, and it's mechanically recycled, so it has very little water usage in its production. And that's really how this impact kind of plays out.
Mm-hmm. So to change the perception, it also has less impact because we're decreasing the percentage of organic cotton, essentially.
In a sense, I mean, the whole idea is any grown materials, whether it's conventional cotton or organic cotton, has a much higher water usage than most recycled materials, especially like something like recycled cotton. So especially if you're concerned about water, it's a no-brainer, right? I'll just keep adding more recycled cotton into your systems.
Mm-hmm. Great. So now let's go to the future scenario. The all Moroccan supply chain. So I like to reiterate again. So we kept the same baseline when it comes to the collection and sorting part. So here again, we have two factories, two regions, Marrakesh and Tangier, going into the consolidation center for sorting for accuracy and also volume aggregation. Then we have the warehouse. The mechanical recycling, fiberizing is done in Morocco. But what the difference here is to the baseline that the yarn spinning is also happening in Morocco, which today is just not the case. And fabric knitting, finishing, same as baseline in Morocco. So essentially, we are eliminating the shipment to Spain and then back to Morocco. So the fabric setup remains the same, 20% post-industrial, 80% organic cotton. But now what do we see, Akhil?
Yeah, this is to me, it's one of the most interesting scenarios because it's hopefully where the system is going towards everything in Morocco. Uh, but obviously, the grid has an outsized impact here when you look at it, right? If you look at the Moroccan electricity grid right now, 62% is coal powered, and compare that to Spain, where natural gas and wind are about 22% each. So there's a massive differential that's happening here, and the rest is a lot of oil and hydro and all those things. So therefore, you can see the impacts jump. It's quite obvious, like just adding this big energy intensive stage of spinning back into Morocco makes a bit of impact, slightly offset by not having the transport to Spain and back in this case. But again, this is all due to the grid over here. So you can actually clearly identify just by looking at this where the intervention is. This is very easily defined as low-hanging fruit, where you can see the grid interventions have such an outsized impact on this. If it's switched to renewables, which was a scenario, that you could see what the total impact could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super interesting. That for us was a surprise as well, I have to be honest. You mentioned already the very straightforward interventions, key takeaways and recommendations, but would you like to summarize them for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, overall, we compared against organic cotton. There's something interesting and important to say. Like, so overall, you can see that baseline beats conventional cotton hands down, uh, showing that even at 20% recycled content, which is very much on the lower end, has a huge impact that can be brought in. And the simplest thing to do is just increasing that recycled content. I think that is the lowest of the lower hanging fruit. And recycling operations itself sometimes has been called out as a bit noir in if the collection and usage and the transportation around that and the mechanics around that could have an impact, but it's actually really, really low. So overall sorting, then the mechanical recycling procedure, all of that had a contribution below 5%. So it really doesn't have a huge impact at all. But of course, increasing recycled content is the easiest thing to do. And the next thing is, of course, the grid, right? Moving towards a much cleaner Moroccan grid can have a 12% climate change reduction when switched to photovoltaics. Also, one thing that is interesting was logistics has a impact as well, but just optimizing it, logistics where avoiding that fiber transportation to Spain can have this additional impact of 76% reduction in logistics impact overall. So this was to me quite interesting. Keeping it local does help, but it only really works if there is a way to address the grid issue overall, or offset that in some format by increasing the recycled content.
Yeah, thank you very much, Akhil. So, yeah, so I think it was for us, we went into the study with expectations. I think we learned a bit different, but things are really manageable and can be addressed. So clearly we learned recycled content has less impact, but it was very important also to understand that the local context, local infrastructure is very crucial to consider when you draw conclusions, when you take decisions on the next steps. That is also a good opportunity now for a transition. I would like to hand over to Karla Eleanor now to discuss the implications, your thoughts around this one. What are your major learnings and what would be the next steps?
Great. Thank you, Petra. Actually, it's really interesting to see the actual facts from, the work that we've done. Eleanor, the original textile circularity exchange goals were to collaborate and develop circular supply chains, right? What's your thought about how these learnings support this need to actually commercialize these circular systems?
Thanks, Karla. Thanks for the question. I think the way I look at it is that the insights from this LCA really allow us to break down the circular textile value chain, as was highlighted during the presentation, from collection, transport, recycling, spinning, weaving, and this really detailed understanding helps identify the opportunities to reduce carbon emission and to streamline logistics. It really pinpoints to where we can better control products and admin flows and overall lower production costs. And also where we see the learnings is that increasing the share of recycled content clearly demonstrates the environmental benefits, which is critical for expanding circular practices on a commercial scale. And I guess taken together, the findings that were just presented by Petra and Akhil really highlight how this circular textile system can become both market ready and aligned with the decarbonization goals.
Yeah, I think these are the things that, I think Akhil had said it earlier about getting all this data and being able to make decisions based on it. So, are you seeing that based on these learnings from the LCA, do you see that there are targeted next steps for building the circular systems?
Definitely. And I guess, it's no surprise that the two main points I want to highlight are also the ones that Akhil highlighted. And at the risk of repeating ourselves, I think it's really important that we put the emphasis on that, the first one being that exporting textile shoots and then re-importing them from Spain in fiber form is not cost effective, neither in terms of transport costs or carbon footprint. And, the LCA showed a very big, like 76 reduction in logistics related costs if we can avoid this back and forth. So it's therefore key to build a local upstream ecosystem to collect, recycle, and transform those shoots here in Morocco, and that will require significant investments in upstream processes close to where the shoots are. The second point, and again, it was clearly highlighted in the presentation, is that this scenario analysis showed that a fully localized Moroccan value chain can reduce costs by about a little over 12% relative to today's baseline, mostly through optimized logistics, scale efficiencies. But based on current energy sources, this doesn't really currently improve the climate impact due to Morocco's coal heavy energy grid, energy supplied. But, we do see that combining recycled content with a greener energy mix does result in really high impact energy reductions. So, and therefore cost reductions. So yes, one of the key takeaways, as was highlighting in terms of, next steps to achieve viable circularity in Morocco at scale is really to look at greening the energy mix. But having said that, and that's my last point on the topic, but having said that, I fully agree with Akhil's statement that increasing recycled content, regardless, remains one of the most effective and immediate ways to reduce the carbon footprint of textiles. When we replace virgin fibers, we avoid the most emission-intensive stages like cotton cultivation or synthetic fiber production, while the rest of the impact from collection, sorting, recycling comparatively remain low. So that will lead to substantial, low-hanging carbon savings, even without changing the energy mix, which can be more of a longer-term thing to look at from the government's perspective. So integrating recycled content is still definitely the most cost-effective and immediate ways to reduce our footprint.
It's interesting. Obviously, finances are critical, right? But there's the financial modeling. And then how does the financial modeling sort of fit into the development of circular systems? And I think that what we saw here today, it really gives us a more comprehensive picture.
Absolutely. I would definitely agree. I mean, IFC, as you know, we're a bank. We're a bank with a developmental mandate, but we are a bank. We're looking at investments and financing mechanism. And there are things we know, there are things we think we know. And again, I would say an LCA, whether it's for us or any type of investor, really provides essential insights to design an efficient and competitive financial model. The LCA highlights the key areas of value creation, so optimizing logistics, reducing reliance on imports, anticipating, possible emerging regulatory requirements. That can include recycled content threshold, traceability standards, etc. So by framing circularity as a driver of environmental performance, the LCA really strengthens investment decisions across recycling, logistics, and energy systems. So then the financial modeling can then use these findings and translate them into viable bankable project while demonstrating that circular solutions enhance competitiveness and improve and open new market opportunities. So ultimately, for me, the LCA results show how circularity enables businesses to align with current and future market demands while they're still generating long-term commercial value.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that looking at the LCA this way and is, it really gives us a holistic perspective on the industry and where we go. And from IFC's perspective, do you see, the move to circular systems in Morocco a fit to wider strategies, or are there recommendations to the industry to make circularity a reality?
So yes, to both your points, I would say circular production in Morocco strongly aligns with the country's strategic priorities that include the National Strategy for Sustainable Development 2030, the National Waste Recovery Plan, the Industrial Acceleration Plan, and the New Development Model. So it's really fully aligned. It's the direction of travel of the government of Morocco. It's also circular production is also consistent with key international initiatives, particularly the ones out of Europe, which is a key market for Moroccan producers. And so I'm talking about the European ESPR that was mentioned earlier, the digital product passport, the European Strategy for Sustainable and Circular Textiles, for instance. And then to your second point, I would say the key recommendations for advancing circularity within the textile sector, and those go back to the key findings that I mentioned that were clearly explained by Petra and Akhil, is really the need to invest in locally integrated value chains, particularly in upstream processes, recycling, spinning, and other material transformation stage that are not present in Morocco at the moment, to build national resilience and strengthen the industry competitiveness. And the second key, I don't know if it's a recommendation, but key element to me to advance circularity is really to enhance the collaboration across the value chains. So ensuring there are coordinated efforts in collection, sorting, and recycling, that there's a common framework and a common guideline, with a particular emphasis on very robust and shared data governance systems that enable transparency, traceability, and efficiency gains on a systemic level. So these are, to me, the two key next steps to move forward.
It's really a matter of, that collaboration that we talked about in the beginning, that, the Textile Circularity Exchange was meant to do, is to pull everybody together. And I think this highlights this very well. I'm going to pass this back to Petra, who's going to be open this up for a few minutes of Q&A.
I think we have let me stop sharing for now.
Somebody asked the perennial question about whether or not we would be sharing slides.
Yes. So,
and I also, while you look at the question, I'd like to jump in to say, not only will we be sharing the slides, but in the near future, we're also planning on publishing the report of the findings. I mean, they'll be aggregated, anonymized, but there will also be a report.
It's also a 2-pager, like we all shared. If somebody wants the cliff notes, that was done in the announcement. It's a highly shrunk and summarized version of pretty much all of this.
So why do you only have scraps at the beginning on the left? I think it is the recycled content. Fanny, I am not even sure I understand. Are you referring to our visual?
I think it's shoots, right? I think the scraps.
Yes. Yeah, so exactly. So post-industrial fabric scraps were collected from various garment factories. But then, of course, they go into recycling, fiberizing, and then the blending happens at the spinning stage. So the baseline did use this scenario, 2 different garment factories, 2 regions, consolidation center, warehouse, recycling, yarn spinning, fabric mill. And that we compared then with a regular linear 100% organic cotton one. I hope that answers the question.
There's some questions also in Q&A, Petra, not just in the chat. So there's one that says, do you see the World Bank funded projects towards climate change can be influenced across textile circularity projects in Europe and other parts of the world? Maybe that's one for Eleanor.
Yeah.
Do you want me to reread it, or do you see it?
Sorry, yes, I'm reading it now. Okay, so yes and no. I mean, obviously, whatever we do does inform our collective knowledge, and new projects will be using the learnings from our experience in Morocco, and we are working with many colleagues, across the globe to cross-pollinate. However, we do not operate in Europe. So to your specific questions of circular projects in Europe, no, we would not, we would not do that, but definitely in other parts of the world, we're already collaborating across the World Bank Group.
So yeah, thank you, Eleanor. I just want to go back to funding now again. So okay, so where does organic cotton enter the game? At the blending stage, yarn spinning. So when we look at the baseline, so the blending happens at the yarn spinning stage. So then we have a question that I would like to give to Akhil, please. How do you differentiate the linear and the circular product in the LCA software? What are the differences while doing the LCA on these different scenarios?
The it's basically almost as much as as we have shown it in the flows. So the linear product, as much as it is, forms a separate supply chain and it's added at a particular stage. So in this case, at the spinning stage, that's modeled separately and it's organic cotton. And then when it's blended, it becomes part of the overall model and does that. If I were to give an analogy, I always think LCAs. Any LCA is a bunch of smaller LCAs masquerading as a large LCA because for every little thing, you need to know the impact of that in a big trench coat. So you kind of need to see the impact of every little stage for you to kind of see the impact of the next stage. So when you're looking at linear supply chain, when it's organic cotton, we look at the organic cotton supply chain, blend it within the model to the recycled cotton supply chain at the particular stage, and you have the broader LCA that's coming out of this. Differences while doing the LCA on these different scenarios, it's pretty much, as we mentioned, there were 8 scenarios. We found a lot of differences. We primarily looked at energy, water, and CO2 or CO2 equivalent. So this was basically where the differences were seen. Overall, a lot of the differences were due to grid, and definitely there was a lot of differences due to the percentage of recycled materials which we talked about, and that was primarily the big changes that we saw overall, because those are the scenarios we modeled and tested on in this case.
Thank you. Then we have a question from Lydia. Have you looked at the financial costs of implementing the various scenarios and possibly benefits? And if yes, have you added a scenario with investment in 100% photovoltaic panels? Maybe also for Eleanor, but also maybe for Karla.
If you want, Eleanor, I'll take a crack at it first and then hand it over to you. So, the financials, these different scenarios, we have looked at the finances for the scenarios that we've done, right, based on the way that it is now. And so you can see, right, the cost differences between a conventional supply chain versus a circular supply chain. And the circular supply chains, if we're just looking at finances, still will be less expensive than a circular supply chain, right? But you can see that also the supply chains haven't been, and I think Petra, you made the point about, they need to be optimized, and that will actually save money and create better logistics and things like that. So that was done. We have not, if you looked at scenarios, actually, there was a scenario where we could see that if it had a better grid, that it would have a better profile. But in terms of the investment of that and how the investment would balance, that might be something more. I don't know if Eleanor, from the type of work that you folks do you see that if you make an investment, here's how it plays out over time?
Absolutely, we do. So it's not, we have not added a scenario in this study or as part of the LCA, but this is definitely something we do one-on-one with our clients when we look at the financial modeling, and we look at the options, particularly in a country like Morocco, where it's coal intensive, it's not cheap, and there's plenty of sun. So I would say on a case-by-case basis, it is definitely a scenario that we look at. But we don't have public data to share in terms of, a scenario as part of the LCA.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eleanor. Then we have also another questions related to GRS and RCS, the standards. As the requirements are becoming increasingly essential to certify the fibers, do you think it should be made available in every region for easy access towards carrying the production facilities? So first of all, the stakeholders we included are certified, even though we were using 20% for the assessment, which is not part of the requirements, but in general, they are certified already. So funny, is there an ideal percentage of recycled content for cotton products to keep or even increase the quality of the garment? I heard that within plus more than 30% of recycled content, the quality wasn't equivalent anymore for long-term usage. Great question. Karla, you want to take this one?
What I think you have to be careful when you think of anything that's a blanket statement. One of the things that's great about LCAs is they start to get so specific, and so you see how things are. And certainly quality is an important element. But when you say is over 30%, the quality over time, is it going to maintain itself? It depends on so many different issues. So for instance, if it's in denim where they might be doing some heavy washes and they might be doing some, processes that intentionally break down the fabric, maybe you don't use quite as much in some of the jersey. In one of the suppliers that we've worked with, they typically run at about 50% recycled cotton, and they see that meets their requirements. At Accelerating Circularity, we have done trials at different levels, and we have found that we're able to maintain quality targets of participants. So it depends. And the quality of the inputs, how it's recycled, all of those things will have an effect.
Karla, I'd just like to add from an LCA perspective, we've also done LCAs for denim and other fabrics and materials with 50% or more recycled content. And these have been for very, I would say, discerning brands, which more towards luxury, which have very high requirements. And we've found that, because from an LCA perspective, we were doing this for the brand perspective when we presented the results and they started using this, it did meet their quality criteria as well. So it's very right to say, as you said, that it depends because it can be managed.
Feedstocks, right, are using post-industrial, post-consumer. In this instance, we were using all post-industrial, which is a great feedstock.
So thank you very much for everyone for the questions. We are close to the full hour. We say thank you, but I'd like to hand over to Eleanor for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Petra. So first, I really want to thank everybody who's logged in to join this webinar. I hope it was useful and that you'll take away many learnings. We'll definitely, as mentioned earlier, share the presentation and share the report when it comes out. I really want to acknowledge and thank Green Story and Accelerating Circularity for the work on the LCA, Accelerating Circularity for convening and facilitating the exchange, and for all the work, and for hosting today's webinar. I also would like to extend really our sincere appreciation to our partners. You may not know them, but they've been important partners. The AMIT, the Ministry of Industry, the AMD, Moroccan Agency for Investment Promotion, and ISIT. We've also had valuable contributions from key institutional stakeholders, such as the Ministry of Energy, Transition and Sustainable Development, Customs Authority, the Federation of Waste Collectors, and their engagement has been really instrumental in advancing this work. We also want to thank the project participants, such as Inditex, Food of the Loom, and hello, Sean, I see you on the call. EKS, Halotex, Mindtex, CTR Solution, Ziteco, and Press2. They've been really active in the trials, and without them, we would not have an LCA. And finally, in closing, I really want to express IFC's deep gratitude to the governments of Spain and Kingdom of Netherlands, whose financial support made all this work possible. So thank you again for participating. Thank you, Accelerating Circularity, for moderating this webinar. And back over to you, Petra. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. So thanks, everyone. You enjoy your evening and have a great weekend ahead.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.